The blood on her hands wasn't hers, and that terrified Jade Thompson more than anything else she'd faced in her 24 years of life. She stumbled through the emergency room doors at 3 in the morning, her white sneakers leaving crimson prints across the pristine linoleum, her work uniform from the diner soaked through with something warm and sticky that made her stomach turn. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too clinical, and she wanted to scream, but her throat had closed up somewhere between the alley and here. "Please," she managed, her voice cracking. "Please, someone help." The triage nurse looked up, eyes widening at the sight of her, and Jade realized how this must look. But she didn't care about herself. She cared about the woman who'd collapsed in the alley behind Murphy's diner, the woman with skin like fresh snow and hair, the color of moonlight, the woman who'd been bleeding from a wound in her side that looked like someone had driven a stake clean through her ribs. "There's a woman," Jade gasped out. "In my car, she's dying. She needs help now." The nurse was already moving, calling for a gurney, for doctors, and Jade led them out to her beat-up Honda where she'd somehow managed to get the stranger into the back seat. The woman's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow, and up close under the parking lot lights. Jade could see how impossibly beautiful she was, ethereal in a way that didn't seem quite human. They lifted her onto the stretcher, and Jade followed them back inside, ignoring the nurse who tried to ask her questions about what happened, about who this woman was, about the nature of her injuries. How could Jade explain that she'd just been taking out the trash when she'd heard a sound like thunder and found this stranger lying in a pool of her own blood? How could she explain the way the woman's eyes had flickered open for just a moment, crimson as rubies, before rolling back in her head? The ER was chaos on a Tuesday night. Drunk college students with alcohol poisoning, a construction worker with a broken arm, someone screaming about chest pains. They wheeled the pale woman into a treatment room, and Jade pressed herself against the wall outside, her heart hammering against her ribs. A doctor emerged from another room, a middle-aged man with gray temples and tired eyes. He glanced at the woman on the gurney, then did a double take. His face went white. "No," he said flatly. "Absolutely not." The nurse blinked. "Dr. Morrison, she's critical. I don't care." Dr. Morrison took a step back, and Jade could have sworn she saw fear flash across his features. "Get her out of my hospital." "What?" Jade pushed off the wall, anger flaring hot in her chest. "She's dying. She's not my problem." The doctor wouldn't even look at the woman now, and if you knew what she was, you wouldn't have brought her here. "What she is?" Jade's voice rose. "She's a person who needs help." "She's..." Dr. Morrison cut himself off, shaking his head. "I'm not treating her. Find someone else." The automatic doors at the entrance slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees in an instant. The man who entered didn't walk so much as glide, and every head in the emergency room turned to watch him pass. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with hair the color of fresh snow that fell past his shoulders in a cascade of silver white. His skin was pale as marble, and when he moved it was with a predatory grace that made something primal in Jade's hindbrain scream danger. He wore a black coat that swept behind him like wings, and his eyes, God, his eyes were the color of fresh blood. Those eyes found the woman on the gurney, and his expression transformed from cold neutrality to something raw and terrible. "Serafina." His voice was like distant thunder, deep and resonant, and it made the windows rattle in their frames. He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides, and suddenly he was there, leaning over the woman Serafina with one pale hand pressed to her cheek. "Who did this?" The question came out soft, deadly, and Jade felt the hair on her arms stand on end. Dr. Morrison had backed up against the nurse's station, his face ashen. "Lord Vladrick, IU." Those crimson eyes fixed on the doctor, and there was nothing human in that gaze. "You're the attending physician." I can't. You will treat her." "It wasn't a request." "Now, my lord, please understand." Dr. Morrison's hands were shaking. "If the council finds out I treated one of your kind, they'll revoke my license, maybe worse. There are rules. Your rules mean nothing to me." Vladrick straightened to his full height, and he seemed to fill the entire room with his presence. "My consort is dying. You will save her. Or, I can't." The doctor's voice cracked. "I'm sorry, but I can't risk it, not even for you." The snarl that came from Vladrick was nothing short of animalistic. In a blur of movement too fast for Jade's eyes to follow, he was across the room with one hand wrapped around Dr. Morrison's throat, lifting him off his feet like he weighed nothing at all. "Touch her," Vladrick growled, his fangs actual fangs, oh God, gleaming in the fluorescent light. "Or I'll treat you instead." Every instinct Jade had told her to run, to get as far away from this creature as possible, but she found herself frozen in place, her eyes locked on Serafina's pale face. "Stop!" The word burst out of her before she could think better of it. "You're going to kill him!" Vladrick's head turned, and for the first time he seemed to notice Jade. His eyes raked over her blood-soaked clothes, and something flickered in those crimson depths, surprise perhaps, or curiosity. The human who brought her here, he said, and it wasn't a question. Jade swallowed hard. Yes, and if you kill that doctor, she's definitely going to die, because no one else here is going to help you. For a long moment, Vladrik just stared at her, and Jade had the distinct impression she was being weighed and measured, judged by something ancient and utterly inhuman. Then slowly he lowered Dr. Morrison back to the ground and released him. The doctor collapsed, gasping, one hand pressed to his throat. You, Vladrik said to Jade. What's your name? Jade Thompson, Jade Thompson. He said it like he was tasting each syllable. You saved Serafina's life by bringing her here. For that you have my gratitude. But I need your help again. My help? Jade couldn't keep the disbelief out of her voice. I'm not a doctor, I'm a waitress. I don't need your medical expertise. Vladrik moved back to Serafina's side, and the naked concern on his face was almost painful to see. I need a human to advocate for her. Dr. Morrison won't risk treating a vampire, but he might risk it for a human patient. Jade's mind was reeling. Vampires. Real, actual vampires. The woman she'd found in the alley was a vampire, and this terrifying man was what? A vampire lord? And his consort was dying while everyone stood around arguing about it. She looked at Serafina's pale face, at the way her chest barely rose and fell, at the blood still seeping through her clothes. Whatever she was, she needed help. Fine, Jade heard herself say. What do I need to do? Vladrik's expression softened fractionally. Tell them she's your friend. Tell them you don't know what attacked her, but you found her and brought her here. Tell them anything you need to, but make them treat her. Jade turned to Dr. Morrison, who was still rubbing his throat and looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Please, she said quietly. I know you're scared, but she's dying. Whatever she is, she doesn't deserve this. Please help her. The doctor closed his eyes. If I do this, if I treat her, you keep him away from me. And this never happened. As far as the records show, I treated a Jane Doe with a stab wound. Nothing more, agreed, Vladrik said immediately. Dr. Morrison took a shaky breath, then nodded. Get her into trauma too. We need to stop the bleeding before she exsanguinates completely. The next hour passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Jade stayed out of the way while Dr. Morrison and two nurses, both of whom looked terrified, once they got close enough to realize what Serafina was worked to stabilize her. Vladrik paced outside the room like a caged predator, and Jade found herself watching him despite her better judgment. He was beautiful in the way a winter storm was beautiful, dangerous, untouchable, magnificent. Every movement was precise and controlled, but she could sense the barely leashed violence beneath his calm exterior. This was something that could kill her without a second thought, and yet he'd listened to her when she'd told him to stop. How long have you known Serafina? She asked, partly to distract herself and partly because she genuinely wanted to know. Vladrik stopped pacing, his eyes fixed on the treatment room door. 342 years. Jade's breath caught. You're how old are you? Old enough to have forgotten most of it. He glanced at her and there was something almost sad in his expression. Serafina is my consort, my partner, my equal in all things. She was investigating rumors of vampire hunters in this city when she was ambushed. If I'd been with her, he cut himself off, his jaw clenching. You couldn't have known, Jade offered quietly. I should have. The words came out harsh, bitter. I'm the vampire king of the Eastern Realm. It's my responsibility to protect my people, and I failed her. Before Jade could respond, Dr. Morrison emerged from the treatment room, pulling off bloodied gloves. She's stable, he said tersely. For now. The weapon that wounded her was coated in some kind of toxin that's preventing her from healing normally. I've removed the foreign matter and cleaned the wound, but her body needs to fight off whatever poison is in her system. Will she survive? Vladrik's voice was carefully neutral, but Jade could hear the fear beneath it. I don't know. Dr. Morrison looked exhausted. I've done everything I can with human medicine, but vampire physiology is outside my expertise. She needs blood, fresh blood, and rest. Beyond that, it's up to her own regenerative abilities. Vladrik nodded slowly. You have my thanks, doctor, and my promise that this debt will not be forgotten. Dr. Morrison didn't look particularly comforted by that, but he nodded and hurried away, probably eager to put as much distance between himself and the Vampire King as possible. Vladrik moved into the treatment room, and Jade followed without thinking about it. Serafina lay on the hospital bed, still unconscious but looking marginally better than she had before. Someone had cleaned the blood off her face, and Jade could see delicate features that seemed almost too perfect to be real, high cheekbones, a graceful neck, lips the color of pale rose petals. She's beautiful, Jade said softly. She's everything. Vladrik reached out and took Serafina's hand in his, and the gesture was so tender it made Jade's chest ache. She found me when I was at my lowest centuries ago, reminded me why our kind is worth preserving, worth protecting. Without her, I would have become the monster humans already believe me to be. Jade didn't know what to say to that, so she stayed quiet, watching as Vladrik pressed his forehead to Serafina's hand. You should go home, he said after a moment, not looking up. You've done more than enough and you're covered in blood. I can take it from here. What about you? Jade asked. You need to feed her, right? Fresh blood? Vladrik's eyes met hers and there was a warning in them. That's not your concern. I'm making it my concern. Jade crossed her arms, trying to ignore how her heart was racing. You can't just bite someone in the hospital, and I'm guessing you can't leave her to go hunt or whatever it is you do. So you need blood, and I'm offering. You don't know what you're offering. I know enough. Jade moved closer, rolling up her sleeve. I know she needs blood to heal, and I know I'm the only human here who isn't scared of you. So let's do this before I lose my nerve. For a long moment, Vladrik just stared at her, and Jade couldn't read his expression. Then slowly, he nodded. Not me, he said quietly. I could kill you too easily, and Serafina would never forgive me, but I can extract blood safely and feed it to her. If you're certain, I'm certain. Vladrik moved with swift efficiency, producing a sterile needle and collection bag from somewhere in his coat. Did vampire kings just carry emergency blood draw equipment? And Jade tried not to flinch as he inserted the needle into her arm. The whole process took maybe 10 minutes, and by the end of it she felt lightheaded and more than a little woozy. Sit, Vladrik commanded, and she sank into a chair before her legs gave out. She watched through half-closed eyes as he carefully fed the blood to Serafina, coaxing her unconscious body to swallow, and even in her fuzzy state she could see the color returning to Serafina's cheeks. It's working, Vladrik breathed, relief evident in every line of his body. Jade must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, someone was shaking her shoulder gently. She opened her eyes to find Vladrik standing over her, his expression unreadable. It's nearly dawn, he said. I need to take Serafina somewhere safe before the sun rises. But first I need to know, why did you help us? You didn't know what we were when you brought her here, but you must have suspected something wasn't normal, and once you knew the truth you still stayed. Why? Jade rubbed her eyes, trying to organize her thoughts. Because she needed help, she said finally. And because no one else was going to give it to her. I don't care if she's a vampire or a werewolf or whatever else might be lurking around in the dark. She's a person, and she was dying, and that's all that mattered. Something shifted in Vladrik's expression, softening, warming, becoming almost human. You're an unusual woman, Jade Thompson, so I've been told. Jade pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly. Where will you take her? Somewhere the sun can't reach us. Vladrik had already gathered Serafina into his arms, cradling her against his chest with infinite care. But I want you to know you've earned the protection of the vampire court this night. If you ever need anything at all, you have only to call my name. How do I call your name? A ghost of something that might have been amusement crossed his face. Just say it. I'll hear you. And then he was gone, moving so fast that Jade's eyes couldn't track him, leaving her alone in the empty treatment room with dried blood on her clothes and the certainty that her life would never be quite the same again. She went home as the sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Her apartment was a tiny studio in a building that had seen better decades, but it was hers, and she'd never been so grateful to see her own bed. She stripped off her ruined uniform, showered until the water ran clear, and collapsed into sleep without bothering to dry her hair. When she woke up, it was early afternoon and her phone was ringing. She fumbled for it, expecting her manager at the diner, wondering why she'd missed her morning shift. Instead, it was a number she didn't recognize. Hello, Jade Thompson? The voice was female, cool and professional. This is Margaret Chen from the law offices of Nightingale and Associates. Lord Vladrik has retained our services to handle a certain matter on your behalf. Jade sat up, suddenly wide awake. What matter? It seems there was an incident at your place of employment last night. Blood found in the alley. Police asking questions. Lord Vladrik felt it would be best if you had legal representation, should anyone attempt to connect you to the scene. He's also arranged for a substantial deposit to be made into your bank account as compensation for your time and trouble. He didn't need to do that, Jade protested. Nevertheless, it's done. Miss Chen's tone suggested this wasn't up for debate. You'll also find a package waiting outside your door. Lord Vladrik wanted you to have it. After she hung up, Jade opened her front door to find a black box tied with silver ribbon. Inside was a cell phone, sleek, expensive, with only one number programmed into the contacts. There was a note in elegant handwriting. In case you need to reach me. The debt I owe you cannot be repaid, but I will spend eternity trying. Jade stared at the phone for a long time, her thumb hovering over the call button. What would she even say? She barely knew these people, these vampires, and yet she couldn't stop thinking about them. About Serafina's pale face and Vladrik's desperate fear, and the way he'd held his consort like she was the most precious thing in existence. She set the phone aside and tried to go about her day normally. She called the diner and explained there'd been an emergency, promised to come in for the evening shift. She did laundry and grocery shopping and all the mundane tasks that made up her life. But her mind kept drifting back to the hospital, to crimson eyes and impossible beauty, and a world she'd never known existed right alongside her own. That evening, as she was getting ready for work, the new phone buzzed with a text message. Serafina is awake and recovering. She wishes to thank you personally. Would you be willing to visit? Jade's heart did a complicated flutter in her chest. She should say no. She should stay as far away from vampires as possible, go back to her normal life, pretend last night had been some kind of fever dream. But her fingers were already typing. When? Tonight, after your shift ends. I'll send a car. The evening shift at Murphy's Diner passed in a blur of coffee refills and burger orders and customers who had no idea that their waitress had spent the previous night saving a vampire's life. Jade kept expecting police to show up and start asking questions about the blood in the alley, but no one came. Whatever Vladrik had done to clean up the scene, it had been thorough. At 11 o'clock, just as she was hanging up her apron, a sleek black car pulled up outside the diner. The driver was human, or at least, he looked human, and he held the back door open for her with professional courtesy. Miss Thompson, Lord Vladrik is expecting you. The car's interior was all leather and dark wood, obscenely luxurious, and Jade felt intensely out of place in her diner uniform and worn sneakers. They drove through the city as night deepened around them, eventually turning onto a private road that wound up into the hills overlooking downtown. The houses here were massive, set back behind gates and walls, the kind of places that regular people only saw in magazines. They stopped in front of a mansion that looked like it had been transplanted from some gothic fairy tale, all stone and arched windows and climbing ivy. The door opened before Jade could knock, and Vladrik stood there, backlit by warm light from within. He'd changed clothes since the hospital, now wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and somehow the casual attire made him seem even more inhuman. No real person looked like that, moved like that, had eyes that burned with inner fire. Jade. He said her name like a greeting and a question all at once. Thank you for coming. You didn't really give me much choice, she pointed out, but there was no heat in it. Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his lips. I suppose I didn't. Come in. Serafina is eager to meet you. The mansion's interior was exactly what Jade would have expected from a vampire king, opulent but tasteful, full of antiques that probably cost more than she'd make in 10 lifetimes. Oil paintings lined the walls, portraits of pale figures in period dress, and Jade wondered if they were other vampires or just Vladrik and Serafina through the centuries. He led her up a sweeping staircase to a second-floor bedroom that was larger than Jade's entire apartment. Serafina was propped up in a massive 4-poster bed, surrounded by pillows, and when she saw Jade, her face lit up with a smile that was almost painful in its beauty. You're her, Serafina said, her voice soft and musical. The human who saved me. I just brought you to the hospital, Jade said, feeling awkward under that intense crimson gaze. The doctors did the actual saving, only because you convinced them to. Serafina held out a pale hand. Please come sit. I want to know everything about the woman brave enough to defy a vampire king. I didn't defy him, Jade protested, but she moved closer and perched on the edge of the bed. I just told him he was being counterproductive. Vladrik made a sound that might have been a laugh. She has a way with words. Up close, Jade could see that Serafina was recovering well. The color had returned to her skin. And though she still looked fragile, there was life in her eyes. She was perhaps the most beautiful woman Jade had ever seen, with features that seemed carved from marble and hair that spilled across the pillows like moonbeams. Tell me, Serafina said, her fingers closing around Jade's hand with surprising strength. Why weren't you afraid when you realized what I was? Jade considered the question carefully. I was afraid, she admitted, terrified actually. But you were dying, and being scared wasn't going to help anyone. So I just did what needed to be done. Remarkable. Serafina glanced at Vladrik, something unspoken passing between them. You gave your blood to heal me, Vladrik told me. That's no small thing, offering your life's essence to a vampire. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. Jade shifted uncomfortably. Though I'm still not entirely sure this isn't some kind of elaborate hallucination. It's not. Vladrik had moved to stand beside the bed, one hand resting on Serafina's shoulder in a gesture of casual intimacy. Vampires are real, as are a dozen other things that go bump in the night. We've existed alongside humanity for millennia, hidden in plain sight. Why? Jade asked. Why hide? Because humans fear what they don't understand, Serafina said softly. And fear leads to violence. There have been purges throughout history, witch hunts that caught more than just witches. We learned long ago that survival meant secrecy. But you were hunting vampire hunters, Jade pointed out. So some humans know about you. Vladrik's expression darkened. There are always those who discover our existence. Most are content to leave us alone, recognizing that we mean them no harm. But some believe we're abominations that must be destroyed. They hunt us with silver and stakes and holy water, killing without trial or mercy. The ones who attacked Serafina, Jade said, understanding dawning. What happened to them? Gun. Vladrik's voice was flat, emotionless, and Jade didn't need to ask what that meant. They won't threaten anyone again. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken finally by Serafina squeezing Jade's hand. Enough talk of dark things. I want to know about you, Jade Thompson. Vladrik says you're a waitress, but surely there's more to you than that. So Jade found herself talking, telling them about her life growing up in foster care, working her way through community college, the degree in social work she'd earned but couldn't afford to use because entry-level positions didn't pay enough to cover her student loans. She told them about the diner and her tiny apartment and her dreams of someday making a real difference in the world. They listened with an intensity that was almost unnerving, as if every word she spoke was precious. When she finally ran out of things to say, Serafina was smiling. You have a good heart, the vampire said. A rare thing in any world. I can see why Vladrik likes you. Jade blinked. He doesn't even know me. He knows enough. Serafina glanced at her consort, amusement dancing in her eyes. He's been talking about you all day. The brave human girl who faced down a vampire king. The woman with no reason to help but helped anyway. You've made quite an impression. Vladrik had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, which was oddly humanizing. You were impressive, he said to Jade. Not many humans would have done what you did. Well, I'm glad I could help. Jade stood, suddenly feeling like she was intruding on something private. I should probably go. You need to rest and I have an early shift tomorrow. Wait. Serafina's hand shot out, catching Jade's wrist. Come back. Visit us again, please. It's been so long since we had someone interesting to talk to. Someone who sees us as people rather than monsters. Jade hesitated, common sense warring with curiosity and something else she couldn't quite name. I don't know if that's a good idea. Why not? Vladrik asked, moving closer. You've already been exposed to our world. There's no putting that knowledge back in the box. And frankly, I'd feel better if you remained under our protection. If other vampires learned that you helped Serafina, they might view you as a threat or an asset. Either way, your life could be in danger. That was a sobering thought. So what? I'm just supposed to hang out with vampires now. Would that be so terrible? Serafina's expression was hopeful. We can offer you things, Jade. Protection, yes, but also knowledge. Purpose. A chance to be part of something larger than yourself. I need to think about this, Jade said slowly. Of course, Vladrik inclined his head. Take all the time you need. But the offer stands, and the protection is already in place whether you accept it or not. You saved my consort's life. That makes you family by the old laws. The driver was waiting to take her home, and Jade spent the entire ride staring out the window, her mind churning. Family. She'd never had much of that, bouncing from foster home to group home throughout her childhood. And now a vampire king was offering her a place in his world, as casually as someone might offer a cup of tea. It was insane. All of it was absolutely insane. But when she got home and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, all she could think about was Serafina's smile, and Vladrik's fierce protectiveness, and the way they'd listen to her, talk about her boring, ordinary life like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. She picked up the phone Vladrik had given her and stared at it for a long time before typing out a message. Same time next week? The response came almost immediately. We'll be waiting. Over the following weeks, Jade fell into a strange new routine. Days were spent at the diner, slinging hash and collecting tips, living her normal human life. But her nights belonged to the vampires. She visited the mansion several times a week, at first ostensibly to check on Serafina's recovery, but increasingly just because she wanted to. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, history and philosophy and politics and art. Vladrik, she learned, had been born in the 1600s somewhere in Eastern Europe, turned into a vampire during a war he could barely remember. Serafina was even older, though she refused to give an exact age, and she'd been a scholar before her transformation. They showed her the hidden world beneath the mundane one she'd always known: vampire courts that met in the basements of normal buildings, blood banks that catered to undead clientele, entire societies that existed in the spaces between human awareness. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, and Jade drank it all in with the thirst of someone who'd spent their whole life feeling like they didn't quite fit anywhere. You're not afraid of us, Serafina observed one night as they sat in the mansion's library, surrounded by books that were older than countries. Not anymore. Should I be? Jade asked. Most humans are. Serafina closed the ancient tome she'd been reading. Even the ones who know we exist tend to maintain a healthy fear. But you act like we're just people, aren't you, in some ways? Serafina tilted her head, studying Jade with those unnerving crimson eyes. But we're also predators, Jade. We need blood to survive. We're stronger than you, faster, more dangerous. Pretending otherwise is foolish. I don't pretend otherwise, Jade said quietly. I know what you are. I've seen Vladrik angry, remember? I know you could kill me without even trying, but you haven't. You won't. Not all predators are mindless killers. Some have honor, compassion, love. She paused. You and Vladrik, you really love each other, don't you? Serafina's expression softened. More than anything in this world or the next. He's been my partner for over 3 centuries, my lover, my friend, my equal in all things. I cannot imagine existence without him. That must be nice, Jade said wistfully. Having someone who sees you that completely. You'll find it someday. Serafina reached out and touched Jade's hand. Someone who sees past all your walls to the incredible woman beneath. Before Jade could respond, Vladrik appeared in the doorway with the eerie silence that was typical of vampire movement. We have visitors, he said, his tone carefully neutral. Council representatives. They've heard about Serafina's attack and want to discuss security measures. Serafina sighed. How many? 3. Lord Constantine, Lady Morgana, and Theron. Of course Constantine would come. Serafina rose gracefully from her chair. He's been looking for any excuse to question your leadership since you took the throne. Should I leave? Jade asked, already standing. No. Vladrik's response was immediate and firm. You're under our protection, which makes you part of this household. The council needs to see that we have human allies. So Jade found herself standing in the mansion's formal receiving room as 3 impossibly beautiful, terrifyingly powerful vampires swept in like winter wind. Lord Constantine was tall and severe, with hair like spun platinum and eyes that could cut glass. Lady Morgana was smaller but no less intimidating, dressed in clothes that looked vintage but were probably just old, her hair coiled in elaborate braids. And Theron was younger looking than the others. Though Jade was learning that appearances meant nothing with vampires, with sharp features and a hungry expression that made her skin crawl. Lord Vladrik, Constantine said, his voice dripping with false courtesy, and Lady Serafina. How good to see you recovered from your unfortunate incident. Unfortunate. Serafina's tone was ice. Someone attempted to assassinate me, Constantine. Let's not dress it up with euphemisms. Of course, of course. Constantine's eyes slid to Jade and she felt pinned by that crimson gaze like a butterfly on a board. And who is this? Jade Thompson, Vladrik said, moving subtly closer to her in a protective gesture. The human who saved Serafina's life and has earned the protection of our house, a human. Lady Morgana's lip curled. How quaint. Tell me, child, what did they offer you? Money? Power? Immortality? They didn't offer me anything, Jade said, pleased that her voice came out steady despite her racing heart. I helped because it was the right thing to do. Theron laughed, the sound sharp and unpleasant. The right thing. How deliciously naive. Tell me, little human, do you know what your vampire friends do to survive? How many people they've killed? Enough. Vladrik's word cracked like a whip. You came here to discuss security, not to interrogate my guest, did we? Constantine moved further into the room, examining the space like he was cataloging its weaknesses. Or did we come to assess whether the vampire king is fit to rule, given that his own consort was nearly killed under his watch? The temperature in the room dropped precipitously, and Jade could feel the tension like a physical force. Vladrik's eyes had gone completely crimson, no white visible, and when he spoke his voice resonated with power that made the windows rattle. My fitness to rule is not in question, Constantine. I've maintained peace between our kind and the humans for 2 centuries. I've protected our people from hunters and kept our existence secret. One attack does not negate that. One attack that nearly succeeded, Lady Morgana interjected. If not for this human's intervention, Serafina would have died. What does that say about your ability to protect those closest to you? It says that I have allies in unexpected places. Vladrik gestured to Jade. This woman faced down armed hunters to save Serafina. She donated her own blood to speed the healing. She showed more courage in one night than the council has shown in decades. A human's courage means nothing, Theron said dismissively. They're mayflies, here and gone in the blink of an eye. You risk exposure by bringing her into our world. The only ones risking exposure are those who attack their own kind in public, Serafina said coldly. The hunters who ambushed me knew exactly where I'd be and when. Someone gave them that information. Someone from our world. The silence that followed was deadly. That's a serious accusation, Constantine said slowly. It's the truth. Serafina's eyes blazed. I've been investigating vampire hunter cells for months. They're too well informed, too prepared. Someone is feeding them intelligence. Someone in the council, perhaps. Lady Morgana drew herself up, fury radiating from her. You dare suggest that one of us would betray our own kind? I'm suggesting that we have a traitor, Serafina said. And until we find them, no one is above suspicion. The 3 council members exchanged glances and Jade could practically see them recalculating their approach. Finally, Constantine inclined his head in a gesture that was probably meant to be respectful but came across as mocking. We will, of course, assist in your investigation, he said, and we'll strengthen security measures across all territories. But Vladrik, Understand this, the council is watching. Any more incidents and we'll have no choice but to question your ability to lead. Duly noted, Vladrik said flatly. After the council members left, the tension in the room eased fractionally. Serafina sank into a chair, looking suddenly exhausted, and Vladrik moved to her side immediately. They know, Serafina said quietly. Or at least they suspect. Then we need to move faster. Vladrik's jaw was set. Find the traitor before they can do any more damage. I'm sorry, Jade said, feeling like she'd somehow made things worse. If my being here caused problems, you didn't. Vladrik turned to look at her, and his expression was softer than she'd ever seen it. The council would have found some excuse to challenge my authority regardless. At least this way they know we have human support. For what it's worth, Jade said, I thought you handled that really well. Constantine was clearly trying to get a rise out of you, and you didn't take the bait. Centuries of practice, Vladrik said dryly, though I wanted nothing more than to rip his throat out. Violence is so rarely the answer, Serafina murmured, though she was smiling slightly, no matter how satisfying it might be. Over the next few weeks, Jade learned more about vampire politics than she ever wanted to know. The council was apparently a governing body made up of the oldest and most powerful vampires in the region, and while Vladrik held the title of Vampire King, his authority wasn't absolute. He ruled with the council's consent, and if enough of them turned against him, he could be removed from power or even destroyed. It's all very medieval, Jade observed one evening as Vladrik explained the intricacies of vampire law, trial by combat and blood oaths and all that. We're medieval creatures, Vladrik pointed out. Most of us were born in eras when that was simply how things were done. Changing traditions that are centuries old isn't easy. They were in his study, a room Jade had come to love for its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and the massive desk that had probably witnessed countless important decisions. Serafina was out meeting with informants, trying to track down leads on the traitor, and Jade had stayed behind to keep Vladrik company. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Being turned, living forever? Vladrik was silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of the wineglass he was holding. Sometimes, he admitted, I've watched empires rise and fall, seen humanity make the same mistakes over and over again. Lost people I cared about to time and violence and simple bad luck. Immortality sounds appealing until you realize how exhausting it can be. But you have Serafina, Jade said. Yes. His expression softened. She makes eternity bearable. More than bearable, she makes it worthwhile. When I'm with her, I remember why I chose to keep existing, keep fighting, keep trying to make this world a better place. You really love her, Jade said, and it wasn't a question. More than I have words to express. Vladrik set down his glass and looked at Jade directly. Love is the only thing that survives immortality intact. Everything else fades: ambition, hatred, even grief. But love endures. Something in Jade's chest ached at the naked honesty in his voice. I hope I find that someday, she said softly. You will. Vladrik's gaze was intense, unreadable. You're the kind of person who inspires devotion, Jade. Someone will see that eventually. Before Jade could figure out how to respond to that, Serafina burst through the study door, her face alight with excitement and triumph. I found him, she announced. The traitor, and you're not going to believe who it is. The revelation that Theron, one of the council members who'd visited weeks earlier, was the traitor shouldn't have been surprising in retrospect. He was young by vampire standards, ambitious, and apparently resentful of Vladrik's leadership. But having suspicions confirmed was different from having proof, and Serafina had brought back both. He's been selling information to the hunters for months, she explained, spreading documents across Vladrik's desk. Meeting locations, names of vulnerable vampires, weaknesses in our security. The attack on me was just the latest in a series. Vladrik's expression was carved from stone. How did you find out? I followed the money. Serafina's smile was sharp. Theron's been receiving regular deposits from a shell company controlled by a known hunter organization. Not particularly subtle, once you know where to look. What happens now? Jade asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Now I call a council meeting and present the evidence, Vladrik said. Treason carries only one punishment among our kind. The meeting was held 3 nights later in a location Jade hadn't known existed, a massive underground chamber beneath the city. All stone columns and vaulted ceilings that looked like they belonged in a medieval cathedral. Vampires filled the space, dozens of them, all pale-skinned and red-eyed and beautiful in that otherworldly way that still made Jade's hindbrain scream danger. She stood beside Serafina at the edge of the gathering, feeling intensely conspicuous as the only human present. Several vampires stared at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to disdain, but none approached. The protection of the Vampire King, it seemed, carried real weight. Vladrik stood at the chamber's center, with Theron kneeling before him. The younger vampire's face was a mask of fury and fear, and Jade noticed his hands were bound with what looked like silver chains. Theron of the Western Territory. Vladrik's voice echoed through the chamber, formal and cold. You stand accused of treason against our kind, of conspiring with hunters, of providing information that led to the deaths of at least 12 vampires and the near death of my consort. How do you plead? I plead that you're a weak king, Theron spat, his voice shaking with rage. You coddle humans, refuse to take our rightful place as the superior species. We should rule this world, not hide in the shadows like vermin. So you admit to the charges, Vladrik said calmly. I admit to trying to save our people from your cowardice. Theron struggled against his chains. The hunters are right about one thing: this world belongs to the strong. And you've made us weak with your treaties and your rules and your pathetic attempts at peaceful coexistence. Peaceful coexistence is the only thing that's kept us alive this long, Vladrik said. Humans outnumber us 1,000 to 1. If they ever united against us, we'd be wiped out within a generation. Peace isn't weakness, it's survival. Then maybe we don't deserve to survive. Theron's eyes were wild now, desperate. Maybe we should go down fighting instead of fading away into irrelevance. Vladrik shook his head slowly. You're young and foolish, Theron. You don't remember the purges, the witch hunts, the centuries when our kind was nearly driven to extinction. I do, and I will not let your pride doom us to repeat that history. He turned to address the assembled vampires. The evidence of Theron's treason is irrefutable. He collaborated with our enemies, leading to the deaths of our people. Under vampire law, there is only one punishment. No one objected. No one spoke in Theron's defense. The silence was absolute and damning. Vladrik moved with the terrible speed that Jade had seen before, and it was over in an instant, a flash of movement. The sound of something breaking, and Theron crumbled to dust that drifted away like smoke. Jade's stomach turned, but she forced herself not to look away. This was the reality of the world she'd stepped into. Beautiful and terrible in equal measure. After the execution, the council convened to discuss next steps. Jade waited outside with several other non-council vampires, feeling out of place and slightly sick. When Serafina emerged nearly an hour later, she looked exhausted but satisfied. It's done, she said quietly. The council has unanimously reaffirmed Vladrik's leadership. Constantine tried to make an issue of you, but Vladrik shut him down beautifully. An issue of me? Jade blinked. What did I do? Nothing. You just exist as a human in our world, which some of the more traditional vampires see as problematic. Serafina took Jade's arm, steering her toward the exit. But Vladrik made it clear that you're under his personal protection, and anyone who harms you will answer to him directly. That's about as safe as a human can get in vampire society. They emerged into the night air, and Jade breathed deeply, grateful for the fresh breeze after the stuffy underground chamber. I saw him, she said quietly. Vladrik, when he executed Theron. He was so fast I couldn't even follow it. We're predators, Serafina said, echoing her words from weeks ago. Never forget that, Jade. We may be civilized, may have rules and codes of honor, but underneath it all, we're hunters. Killers. I know. Jade looked at her friend because that's what Serafina had become, somehow, in the weeks since that night in the emergency room. A friend who happened to be a centuries-old vampire. But you're also people, complex, interesting people who care about things beyond just survival. Serafina's expression was unreadable in the darkness. You see us more clearly than we see ourselves sometimes. Over the following months, Jade's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined. She kept her job at the diner partly because she needed the money, and partly because maintaining some connection to her old life felt important. But her free time was spent almost entirely in the vampire world. She learned their history, their laws, their complicated web of alliances and rivalries. She met dozens of vampires, from the ancient and powerful to the newly turned and struggling. Some accepted her presence graciously, while others treated her with barely concealed contempt, but all of them respected Vladrik's protection. And somewhere along the way, without quite meaning to, she fell in love. It happened gradually, like snow accumulating flake by flake, until suddenly there's a drift too deep to wade through. Vladrik's fierce protectiveness, his dry humor, the way he listened when she talked like her words mattered, how he'd started asking her opinion on council matters, trusting her judgment despite her being human and barely 24 years old. She didn't mean to fall for him. He was a vampire king, immortal and impossibly powerful and completely devoted to Serafina. But her heart apparently didn't care about any of that. She kept it to herself, burying the feelings deep where no one could see them. Vladrik and Serafina had something beautiful and eternal, and the last thing Jade wanted was to complicate that with her inconvenient human emotions. But Serafina, perceptive as always, noticed anyway. You love him, she said one evening when they were alone in the library. It wasn't a question. Jade's first instinct was to deny it, but she'd never been a good liar. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to. I know he's yours, and I would never... Stop. Serafina held up a hand, and her expression was soft, understanding. You have nothing to apologize for. Vladrik is easy to love. I should know I've been doing it for 3 centuries. Then you're not angry? Angry? No. Serafina set down the book she'd been reading. Jade, can I tell you something? Something I haven't told anyone else in a very long time? Jade nodded, not trusting her voice. Immortality is lonely, Serafina said softly. Even with Vladrik, even with our love for each other, there are times when I feel the weight of all those years pressing down on me. We've been everything to each other for so long, lovers, partners, friends, confidants. But sometimes I wonder if we've become too insular, too closed off from the rest of the world. I don't understand, Jade admitted. Serafina smiled sadly. Vladrik and I love each other deeply, but that doesn't mean we can't care for others as well. Love isn't a finite resource that runs out if you share it. It grows, multiplies, becomes something richer and more complex. She paused. I think Vladrik cares for you too, Jade, perhaps more than he's willing to admit, even to himself. Jade's heart stuttered. That's not possible. Why not? Serafina leaned forward. Because he's a vampire and you're human? Because he's with me? Or because you don't think you're worthy of being loved? All of the above? Jade tried for levity but failed miserably. Then let me tell you what I see, Serafina said. I see a brave, compassionate, intelligent woman who walked into our world with her eyes open and never looked back. I see someone who makes Vladrik laugh, who challenges his assumptions, who reminds him why protecting humanity is worth the effort. I see someone I've come to care about deeply. She reached out and took Jade's hand. I see someone I could love. Jade stared at her, unable to process what she was hearing. Serafina, I know this is overwhelming. Serafina said gently. And I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I'm just telling you that if you have feelings for Vladrik, for me, for both of us, that's not something you need to hide or be ashamed of. We've lived a long time, Jade. Long enough to know that love takes many forms, and rigid definitions often cause more pain than they prevent. Before Jade could formulate a response, Vladrik appeared in the doorway. Serafina, he stopped, looking between them. Am I interrupting something? Yes, Serafina said calmly. But you should probably be part of this conversation anyway. Vladrik entered slowly, his expression wary. What conversation? The one about how we both care for Jade, Serafina said bluntly, and how she cares for us, though she's been trying very hard to pretend she doesn't. Vladrik went very still, his crimson eyes fixing on Jade with an intensity that made her want to sink through the floor. Is that true? Jade opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I didn't mean to, she managed finally. I know it's complicated and you're together and I'm just a human who wandered into your lives, but you're not just anything, Vladrik interrupted, crossing the room in 3 long strides. You're brilliant and brave and you make me want to be better than I am. You make me remember what it's like to see the world through fresh eyes instead of jaded ones. You make me feel alive in a way I haven't in centuries. Oh, Jade breathed. I've been trying to ignore it, Vladrik continued, his voice rough. Trying to convince myself it was just gratitude for saving Serafina, or admiration for your courage, or any number of other things that weren't this. But I can't anymore. I care about you, Jade. Deeply. We both do, Serafina added, rising from her chair to stand beside Vladrik. Together, they were breathtaking, 2 impossibly beautiful beings who looked like they'd stepped out of a Gothic painting. And if you're willing, if you want this, we'd like to see where this goes. No promises, no expectations. Just 3 people figuring out what love looks like when it doesn't fit traditional boundaries. Jade's mind was reeling. I don't understand. You're offering me what exactly? A place in our lives, Vladrik said. In our hearts. A relationship with both of us. If that's something you'd want. Is that even possible? Jade asked weakly. Possible? Serafina laughed softly. Darling, we're vampires. We've made the impossible routine. Besides, love doesn't follow rules. It just is. Jade looked between them. These 2 incredible beings who'd somehow seen something worth loving in an ordinary human waitress. It was insane. It was impossible. It was everything she hadn't known she wanted until this moment. Okay, she said quietly. Yes, I want this, whatever this is. The smile that broke across Vladrik's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds, and Serafina's expression was pure joy. They moved together, closing the distance between them, and when Vladrik cupped Jade's face in his cool hands and Serafina pressed close to her side, Jade felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. We'll take this slowly, Vladrik promised. At whatever pace you're comfortable with. There's no rush, we have time. All the time in the world, Serafina murmured, and when Vladrik leaned in to kiss her, soft and reverent and full of promise, Jade felt like maybe eternity wasn't such a scary concept after all. The next few months were a blur of discovery and joy, and occasional awkwardness, as they all figured out how to navigate this new dynamic. Jade learned that Vladrik was surprisingly tender despite his fearsome reputation, that Serafina could be playful and mischievous when she let her guard down, that being loved by 2 people didn't mean being torn in half but rather being more whole than she'd ever been before. She learned about vampire courtship rituals, about the significance of sharing blood, about the bonds that could form between their kind and humans. She learned that love didn't have to look the way society said it should. It could be big enough to hold 3 people, strong enough to bridge the gap between mortal and immortal, wild enough to defy every expectation. She also learned that dating vampires came with unique challenges. Like the time a rival vampire lord challenged Vladrik's claim on her, and she had to sit through an extremely tense negotiation that nearly ended in violence. Or when Serafina's investigation into hunter cells led to another close call that left Jade's heart in her throat for days. Or the constant awareness that she was aging while they weren't, that someday her time would run out while theirs continued. It was Vladrik who brought up the subject of turning her, on a night when they were curled together in his study. Serafina reading aloud from a book of poetry in a language Jade didn't understand but found beautiful anyway. "You know we'd never force you," he said quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "But the offer is there. If you wanted to stay with us, truly stay with us, we could give you eternity." Jade was silent for a long time, considering. A month ago she might have jumped at the offer, but she'd learned enough about vampires to know that immortality came with a price. "What would I lose?" she asked finally. "The sun," Serafina said softly. "The ability to have children, your human warmth, quite literally vampire blood runs cold, the ease of blending into human society. Your mortality, which is both the obvious answer and the most profound one. What would I gain?" "Time," Vladrik said. "Centuries to learn and grow and become whoever you want to be. Strength, speed, senses beyond human comprehension. The ability to protect yourself instead of always needing protection, and us. Forever, if that's what you want." "I need to think about it," Jade said. "Of course," Vladrik pressed a kiss to her temple. "There's no rush. Take whatever time you need." But the decision came sooner than any of them expected, forced by circumstances beyond their control. It happened on a Tuesday night, of all mundane times. Jade was closing up the diner, tired from a long shift but looking forward to heading to the mansion where Vladrik and Serafina were waiting. She locked the back door and headed for her car, keys in hand. She never saw the attack coming. One moment she was walking across the parking lot, the next she was on the ground with someone's knee in her back and cold metal pressed to her throat. "Vampire whore!" a voice hissed in her ear. "You betrayed your own kind." Jade tried to struggle, but her attacker was strong, preternaturally so. Another hunter, she realized with dawning horror. They'd found her. "Where's your vampire king now?" the hunter snarled. "Can't save you if he doesn't know you're in danger." But he was wrong, because Jade had learned one crucial thing during her months in the vampire world. Vladrik always knew when she was in danger. The blood she'd given to heal Serafina had created a bond, thin but real, and Vladrik could sense her distress like a beacon in the dark. The hunter raised his blade, and Jade closed her eyes, waiting for pain that never came. Instead, there was a sound like wind rushing past, and suddenly the weight was gone from her back. She rolled over to see Vladrik standing over her attacker, his eyes blazing crimson fire and his fangs fully extended. He looked terrifying, ancient, utterly inhuman, and he'd never been more beautiful. "You made a mistake," Vladrik said softly, dangerously. "You touched what's mine." The hunter tried to run, but Serafina materialized from the shadows, blocking his escape. "I don't think so," she said pleasantly. "You see, you tried to kill someone very important to us. That requires consequences." What happened next was swift and brutal and left no doubt that vampires were apex predators. Jade looked away, focusing on breathing, on not throwing up, on the fact that she was alive because these incredible beings cared about her. When it was over, Vladrik helped her to her feet, his hands gentle despite the violence he'd just committed. "Are you hurt?" "No." Jade's voice shook. "Just scared. We need to get you somewhere safe," Serafina said, her expression grim. "If one hunter found you, others might follow." They took her back to the mansion, and Jade spent the rest of the night curled between them while they talked in low voices about security measures and hunter cells and the best way to keep her safe. But Jade barely heard them, too focused on the realization that had crystallized in her mind with perfect clarity. She didn't want to die. She didn't want to leave them. She wanted forever. "Turn me," she said quietly, interrupting their planning. They both fell silent, staring at her. Jade Vladrik started. "Turn me," she repeated, sitting up. "I know what I'm giving up. I know it's permanent, but I don't want to be vulnerable anymore. I don't want to age while you stay young. I don't want to have only a handful of decades with you when I could have centuries. I want to be part of your world, really part of it. So turn me." "This is a big decision," Serafina said carefully. "Made in the aftermath of trauma. Are you sure you're thinking clearly?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Jade looked between them. "I love you, both of you, and I want forever with you if you'll have me." Vladrik's expression was awed. "Of course we'll have you. For as long as you want us, then do it," Jade said. "Make me like you." The turning was both more painful and more transcendent than Jade had expected. It took 3 nights of fever and pain and darkness, 3 nights of feeling her human body die and her vampire one emerge. Vladrik and Serafina stayed with her the entire time, holding her through the worst of it, feeding her blood to speed the transformation, murmuring reassurances when she thought she couldn't bear another moment. But she did bear it, because on the other side waited everything she'd ever dreamed of. When she woke on the 4th night, the world was transformed. She could hear conversations happening 3 floors away, could smell individual scents in the air, blood and dust and old books and the unique fragrance that was Vladrik and Serafina combined, could see in the darkness like it was broad daylight, picking out details her human eyes would have missed, and she was hungry. Oh God, she was so hungry. Easy, Vladrik murmured there at her side in an instant. We have blood. Fresh, ethically sourced. You'll learn to control the hunger in time. Learning to be a vampire was like learning to live in her body all over again. Everything was sharper, faster, more intense. She had to relearn basic tasks like walking and picking things up without crushing them. Had to learn to control her new strength, her new speed, the way her fangs descended when she smelled blood. But she had the best teachers possible, and slowly over weeks and then months she adapted to her new existence. She learned to hunt without killing, to take only what she needed from willing donors. Learned vampire politics and protocol, how to navigate their complex social hierarchies. Learned to use her new abilities to protect herself and others. And through it all, Vladrik and Serafina were there, teaching her, supporting her, loving her with an intensity that still took her breath away. How do you feel? Serafina asked one evening as they stood on the mansion's balcony, watching the city lights spread out below them like stars. Powerful, Jade admitted. And also terrified. I'm going to live forever, potentially. That's a long time to figure out who I am. You don't have to figure it out all at once, Vladrik said, wrapping an arm around her waist. You have time, we all do. Together, Jade said firmly. Together, they agreed in unison. The council meeting to formally recognize Jade's place in vampire society was held 6 months after her turning, and it was nothing short of a spectacle. Jade stood between Vladrik and Serafina, dressed in formal attire that felt both strange and appropriate, while the assembled vampires looked on with expressions ranging from approval to disdain. Lord Constantine predictably objected. A turned human, he said with barely concealed contempt. How common. A member of our family, Vladrik corrected coldly. My consort, as Serafina is my consort. Any who harm her answer to me 2 consorts. Lady Morgana's eyebrows rose. How unconventional. We've always been unconventional, Serafina said pleasantly. It's part of our charm. In the end, the council accepted Jade's new status, though she suspected it had more to do with Vladrik's power and influence than any real approval. But she didn't care. She had everything she wanted: love, purpose, eternity with the 2 people who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and loved her anyway. Life, or rather Undith, settled into a new rhythm after that. Jade took over some of Serafina's responsibilities, investigating hunter activity, using her relatively recent humanity to connect with informants in ways older vampires couldn't. She became a bridge between their world and the human one, helping to negotiate treaties and maintain the delicate balance that kept both sides safe. She also discovered talents she'd never known she had: an aptitude for languages that let her master a dozen of them within a year, a gift for strategy that made her invaluable in council meetings, a fierceness in protecting those she loved that surprised even her. You've become quite formidable, Vladrik observed one night after she'd successfully negotiated a truce between 2 warring vampire factions. I learned from the best, Jade replied, leaning up to kiss him. We're proud of you, Serafina added, appearing at Jade's other side. You've taken to this life better than most vampires twice your age. I have good motivation, Jade said, looking between them. I want to build something that lasts. A world where vampires and humans can coexist peacefully. Where people like me turned humans aren't looked down on but celebrated for bridging 2 worlds. Where love doesn't have to fit in neat little boxes. Then that's what we'll build, Vladrik said firmly. Together. And they did. Over the following years, then decades, Jade watched the world change around them. Technology advanced. Societies evolved. Humans crept closer and closer to discovering the truth about vampires, and the work of maintaining secrecy became increasingly difficult. But through it all, the 3 of them remained constant. Vladrik, fierce and protective and capable of surprising tenderness. Serafina, brilliant and kind and sharper than any blade. And Jade, the bridge between worlds, the human heart in a vampire body. The reminder that love was stronger than any difference. They had conflicts, of course. Disagreements about how to handle council politics. Arguments about security measures, the occasional jealousy or misunderstanding. But they worked through it all, learning to communicate and compromise, and remember that they were on the same side. Jade also learned, in time, That immortality wasn't the burden she'd feared it might be. Yes, she watched human friends age and die, and that never stopped hurting. Yes, the weight of years could be heavy sometimes. But there was so much to experience, so much to learn, so many wonders in the world that couldn't be exhausted in a single human lifetime, and she was never alone. She had Vladrik and Serafina, her partners in every sense of the word. She had the community of vampires she'd helped build, one that was more accepting and diverse than the rigid hierarchy she'd first encountered. She had purpose and love and the satisfaction of knowing she was making a real difference. On the night of her 50th anniversary as a vampire, they threw a celebration at the mansion. Vampires from across the region attended, along with a handful of trusted humans who knew the truth about their world. It was a night of music and laughter and joy, a testament to how far they'd all come. "What are you thinking about?" Serafina asked, finding Jade on the balcony where she'd escaped for a moment of quiet. "Everything," Jade admitted. "That night in the alley when I found you, the hospital. Vladrik threatening to treat the doctor. How terrified and certain I was that I was doing the right thing," she smiled. "I had no idea where it would lead to here," Vladrik said, joining them. "To us. To a life more extraordinary than any of us could have imagined. I still remember being human," Jade said quietly. "Being scared and small and certain I'd never matter, never make a difference, never be loved like this." "You've always mattered," Serafina said firmly. "From the moment you pulled me out of that alley you mattered. You just couldn't see it yet." "I see it now," Jade said, "and I wouldn't change a single thing." They stood together in comfortable silence, three figures on a balcony overlooking a city full of humans who had no idea that vampires walked among them. Three people, three vampires who'd found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the chaos. "Forever is a long time," Vladrik observed. "Good," Jade replied, taking his hand and Serafina's, linking the three of them together. "I'm going to need it to show you exactly how much I love you both." And there, under the stars that had witnessed countless love stories throughout human and vampire history, they sealed their bond with kisses and promises, and the absolute certainty that they'd found something worth keeping for eternity. The years continued to pass, but they remained unchanged, unshakable, utterly devoted to each other and to the world they were building together. A world where humans and vampires could coexist in peace, where love transcended species and tradition and time itself, where a waitress named Jade Thompson, who'd once thought herself ordinary, had become extraordinary, not through power or politics, but through the simple act of choosing compassion over fear. And if you asked any vampire in the realm what the greatest love story in their history was, they would all give the same answer. The vampire king, his ancient consort, and the human-turned-vampire who'd saved them both by refusing to let anyone die on her watch. It was a story that would be told for centuries to come. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful magic in any world, human or vampire, is simply choosing to care when it would be easier to walk away. And they all lived happily ever after, for as long as forever lasted, which, for vampires, was exactly as long as they wanted it to be.